What is America's fascination with conflict, specifically war? Actually, let me rephrase that. What is the American politician's fascination with war? Since the beginnings of this channel, pretty much every topic I have discussed has been about conflict between one side or the other. Conflict that, for the most part, has been addressed with dialogue and, in some instances, compromise. In the public sphere, this is also known as politics. Politics usually requires a give and take from all parties to be successful. I'm sure all of you have heard the phrase reaching across the aisle, which is the premise of political compromise. War, on the other hand, does not require this. Recently, I started to really look at this dynamic of war and found that our politicians on both sides of the aisle are foregoing political discourse for war. In this episode of Office of the Patriot, I'm going to uncover the reasons why war has become the more attractive alternative to politics for many politicians and Americans, even when there's no one to fight. Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, I try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left and rhino right. If you are a subscriber, thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you are a returning viewer, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future presentations. And if you are a first-time visitor to my channel, well, congratulations on finding it. It's usually hidden very well by the YouTube algorithm. However, I do hope you find the content worth coming back for. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. So, what is war? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, war is a state of usually open and declared armed hostile conflict between states or nations. In more general terms, it's a struggle or competition between opposing forces or for a particular end. To put the United States' involvement in war into context, we need to look at conflicts that occurred in the late 20th century from, say, the 80s to around the late 90s, around a 20-year span. I'm also going to include wars that NATO was involved in because the U.S. is part of NATO. So, in 1982, the U.S. was involved in the multinational intervention in Lebanon. In 1983, the invasion of Grenada. In 1986, the bombing of Libya. In 1987, the tanker war in the Persian Gulf. In 1989, the invasion of Panama. 1990, the Gulf War. 91, Iraqi no-fly zone enforcement operations. In 1992, U.S. intervention in the Somali Civil War, as well as the Bosnian and Croatian wars. In 1994, the U.S. intervention in Haiti, and in 1998, the Kosovo War. Just looking at the cost of the Kosovo War, a war that I would guess over 90% of all Americans had no idea the United States was involved in. The cost of this war, according to the House of Representatives Committee on International Relations, was $1 billion per month. More recent wars like Desert Shield, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Israel, the cost is substantially higher. Through fiscal year 2022, the U.S. federal government has spent and obligated $8 trillion. That's trillion with a T on post 9/11 wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and in other locations. So you can see how money is a big reason for war. But what happens when there's no other country to fight, or defend if you prefer that position? As I said earlier in the presentation, American politicians love the idea of war, but if there's no one to fight, they'll start wars against something or an idea they oppose, like drugs, terror, racism, fascism, poverty, you name it, and our government probably has started a war against it. And like sheep to slaughter, the American public jumps on board backing these wars with the giddy enthusiasm of a teenage girl on her first date. So, to find the answer why we love war, I started a Google search. And interestingly enough, I found a number of articles that address why people love war. Within the lives of all people, there's conflict. And how we deal with that conflict could lead to peaceful resolution or war. Peaceful resolution, as I referred to earlier, requires the political process and compromise. This requires a significant amount of effort and time from all parties. War does not. War unfetters a person. It lets them behave in a way that negotiating and compromise would not allow them to do. When you declare war on something, it's liberating and empowering. People engaged in war are not constrained by the social contracts they live by day to day. Morals are sidelined to reach the end goal of all wars, and that's victory. Take a look at the behavior by House Democrats when Trump was in office, and you'll see that ethical and moral behavior was sidelined for the end goal of ousting him and all conservatives from power.
About a constant drumbeat of heated language. Well, as I'm sure everyone watching expected, we need to show you some of their own words.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
You got to be ready to throw a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch.
Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
That I thought he should have punched him in the face.
I feel like punching him.
I'd like to take him behind the gym if I were in high school. If we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him. No, I wish we were in high school, I could take him behind the gym.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
Take him out now.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Please, get up in the face of some Congress people.
People will do what they do.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
We're going to go in there, we're going to...
This is just a warning to you Trumpers. Be careful. Walk lightly. And for those of you who are soldiers, make them pay.
If you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be? Does one of us have to come out alive?
By declaring war on something, it's looked at as a battle between right and wrong, between good and evil. As an example, prior to 1937, the possession of marijuana was legal in the United States. But after that, or because of that, the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act essentially made all cannabis products illegal throughout the United States. However, it wasn't until 1971 when the federal government declared the war on drugs that the attitudes of people changed regarding marijuana. When there was no war, there wasn't much investment in a cause, in this case, money, allocated to fund drug enforcement. Prior to 1971, the federal government only spent, on average, $2 million per year in illegal drug enforcement. However, 2 years after the war on drugs was initiated, President Nixon created the Drug Enforcement Administration, more commonly known as the DEA, and swore in 1,470 special agents with a budget of over $70 million. Our government had a new war that brought in money and provided power to a lot of people. Today, the DEA has over triple the amount of agents and receives over $2 billion per year to continue this war. And for years, the American public has endorsed these expenditures, all for the sake of combating controlled substance use and sales. But we are no closer to winning this war than we were when our government initiated it over 50 years ago. But that's it, isn't it? Drugs are bad, evil, if you will, and convincing good people, good Americans, that declaring war on drugs was a good and moral thing to do. So they did it with no reservations. And anyone who didn't agree with this war was the enemy and should be defeated. No quarter given. And when good Americans win this war, we will all have peace. That was the bill of goods that was sold to the American people. Unfortunately, we all bought it without even looking at the cost or knowing if the war would work at all. There comes a time when war is inevitable. Israel is a prime example, as they are currently faced with that circumstance right now. However, when politicians forego the political process with calls for violence, force, and war just to achieve their end goal, it's a sign they are not doing it for the American people. They're doing it for either money, power, and or influence. When politicians opt for war against something or someone in lieu of the political process, what they're really saying is that either there was no other political avenue available to reach the desired outcome, or they don't have the skill, patience, or desire to do the job they were hired to do, to use all political avenues of discourse, political discourse, and compromise to reach the desired result. And if it's a case of the latter, then the American people need to use their power to remove these politicians from office. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoyed the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.